Hello everyone, this is Darion G&B here, and welcome to another Hedgehog Month, where this time we're going to be doing something quite interesting. Today we're going to be doing a personal rewrite of what is currently the infamous Sonic Prime. If you've seen my video on the series, or at least have witnessed some online discussion surrounding it, you would of course know that the show ain't all that perfect. Whether it be the meh character progression and writing, the very mediocre comedy and tone, the characterization or utilization of the Sonic cast, you get it. The show has a lot of faults, far from the worst Sonic show, but not really something that'll leave that much of an impact in the far future either. Since the show's conclusion last year, I couldn't help but have the thought creep its way into the back of my mind, how would I have done it? If I was someone at Sega or Wildbrain, how would I have tackled this show? And here we are now. Today I am doing my very own Sonic Prime rewrite. So I'm going to need y'all to bear with me for this video, because with other rewrites you may have seen that cover games, movies, I'm attempting to put my own unique spin on a whole show. A 24 episode story, so forgive me if not every single thing is laid out in meticulous detail. Not to mention, this is the first time I'm attempting a rewrite in general, so please, again, bear with me. Okay, so before we get into the actual meat of this rewrite, there are a few things that I wanted to go over first. Number one, the base of this rewrite is what I would have done had I been in charge of it. Which of course means a lot of this stuff will be my opinion on how I would have preferred a lot of these things to have gone down. So if you don't rock with that, you can leave and make a rewrite of your own. Or, just let me know how you do it in the comments. Number two, this isn't going to be a hard rewrite where I basically make my own show, like I've seen others do with their own rewrites in the past. The bulk of what the original show did will remain largely the same. Sonic shatters the prism, goes to select different worlds, goes through a character arc and grows, etc. A lot of that general stuff will remain the same. I'll just be putting my own unique spin on it with adding in different characters, themes, etc. And three, in regards to the whole Sonic Prime canonicity thing, my rewrite will be under the guise of it being loosely connected to the games. Like everything from Sonic 1, SA1 to Shadow 05, including the advanced games and Sonic Battle and stuff, has taken place at this point. But again, very loosely. I'm kind of trying to approach this as a sort of soft reboot kind of angle. Like, yeah, these events took place, but not exactly one-to-one, and they aren't entirely relevant to what's currently going on, For example, by this point in time, Sonic and Shadow have worked together to save the world. Sonic and company have obviously dealt with Eggman numerous times at this point, faced a few ancient deities and one or two Gizoids here and there. Sonic has of course fought a robotic replica of himself numerous times by now, but has not gone through any alternate dimension shenanigans yet. So obviously no secret rings or Black Knight events have taken place. Like I said, in my rewrite, not every single thing that happened in these games happened verbatim. Just the main gist has happened, and I hope you'll understand why I went that route when we get towards the end. And with all of that out of the way, let's get into the rewrite, shall we? First off, if I were in charge of things, instead of a 24 episode story, I think I'd personally cut it down to between 15 to maybe 18 episodes or so, with the first episode being the same length in the original show, 40 minutes. I feel like a 40-minute premiere episode does wonders for the story of this rewrite, because a problem I had with the first episode of the base show is that we were never given that proper amount of time to acquaint ourselves with the Prime Sonic cast. Proper amount of time for us to become well acquainted with these versions, proper amount of time for us to become well versed in their personalities and their connection to Sonic. For fans, this stuff doesn't matter too much, but for general audiences, I feel like we needed more time with these guys. So that's what I intend to fix in my rewrite, by having the entire 40-minute premiere revolve around the Prime Sonic cast, without diving headfirst into all the multiverse shenanigans just yet. Anyway, let's begin properly. The story starts like the original, with Sonic running around Green Hill. Everything is largely the same, with Sonic narrating his life and past adventures, talks about his adventures facing off against Eggman, makes a few sly remarks about saving the world from this egg-shaped loser. I'd imagine during this scene we'd have footage of Sonic running with pixelated art overlaid with his past adventures. People kind of shit on the pixel art aesthetic the show chooses to use sometimes, almost rightfully so if I'm being honest, but if done right and leaned more into the advanced style, it could be a pretty cute way to use them, I feel. I'd have these images feature Sonic and company helping stop chaos, Sonic and Shadow stopping the Ark from destroying the planet, The Sonic Heroes facing off against Neo Metal, stuff like that. Anyway, Sonic makes further comments on not being alone and having a ton of help along the way. That's when we get a shot of Tails in the tornado, accompanied by Knuckles and Amy, shouting at Sonic that Eggman is straight ahead. Sonic gives Tails his trademark wink and smile and races off towards Eggman. I like how the show jumps straight into the action, and I wanted to keep that same energy in this rewrite. Except something I'd change here is that instead of us opening with the fight inside the cave for the Paradox Prism, we're instead starting off with the fight at the bottom of the mountain, which leads to Sonic creating that big shockwave. I feel like this would be a good way to get introduced to each character and briefly explore what they're all about. Knuckles jumps off the tornado and lands on the field as Sonic makes it there alongside him. He makes a comment on hoping this Eggman outing is worth him being here. "I didn't come all this way from Angel Island for nothing," he says. I'm sorry for the very shitty voice impersonations, by the way. Mentioning that the Chaotix gang owed him a favor and are guarding the Master Emerald while he's helping out here. I'd imagine Sonic giving some witty remark that hints towards their small rivalry, like their interactions in Frontiers, for example. Something like, "Yeah, I'd hate to keep you away from doing a whole lot of nothing." Or something like that. I don't know, y'all could probably come up with something better on that end. Sonic then gets bum-rushed with a hug by a happy and excited Amy Rose, who jumped off the tornado just a few moments after Knuckles. She yells excitedly about being on another adventure with Sonic, and Sonic, letting out a nervous laugh, gently shoves her off, and makes a trademark "long time no see" comment. Anyway, we then get a shot of an Eggman mech, but we don't see his face. All we hear is Eggman's voice ominously saying, "Right on time." He makes this big theatrical opening, as Eggman tends to do. Sonic makes a cocky retort, and the battle ensues. The battle remains about the same as in the original show, with Sonic and Eggman making it up the mountain. Except here, from afar, we get a shot of Shadow and Rouge watching the battle. The two briefly look at each other before splitting up and going their own way. The battle presumably goes on for quite some time, and eventually, Sonic, not listening to Tails' warnings, knocks Eggman to the ground and it creates a shockwave that shakes the entire island. Sonic is pretty lively after the battle and tries to follow a visibly upset Tails to his workshop, while Knuckles and Amy stay behind to do some cleanup. We get that scene of Eggman boasting about how his plan worked, and he goes to explore the cave for the prism. Orbot and Cubot won't be a part of this rewrite as, like I mentioned, at this point in time, they were not created yet. And they serve no real purpose on the OG show anyway, so nothing will really be lost. I'm bringing this up to get two things across when it comes to Eggman. The pre-fight banter between him and Sonic served to kind of show his gravitas and boastful persona, while here, I wanted to showcase the more cunning side of Eggman. I'd like to also throw in some comedic ranting and childish whining and monologuing to his badniks about always being stopped by Sonic. But this time will be different, he swears. He'll use the ultimate reality-altering power of the Paradox Prism to turn the world into a mechanical monarch for him to rule in one fell swoop. And not even Sonic will be able to stop him, he claims. Sonic, while going after Tails, then runs into none other than Shadow the Hedgehog. Sonic, being pretty confused as to why Shadow would be on South Island of all places, tries to get more info out of him. Shadow's pretty tight-lipped as he comments that he's here for his own reasons, and doesn't need to disclose any of that with Sonic. He's visibly upset with Sonic's presence, far more than he usually is, and he asks what that giant shockwave was. Sonic, in a very tongue-in-cheek way, comments on not needing to disclose all of that with Shadow. Shadow, letting out a slight smirk at this response, straightens his face and lets Sonic know that he's looking for a Chaos Emerald, along with another powerful artifact's energy being detected on the island, and Emerald was also detected to have navigated there as well, keeping to himself that he already found it while Sonic was battling Eggman. Sonic then lets him know the shockwave came from him defeating Eggman. Shadow accepts this answer, looking slightly shocked and puzzled, but then attempts to leave Sonic with a warning that it'd be best for Sonic not to stand in his way. I'd imagine Sonic responds with something snarky before Shadow vanishes using his Chaos Snap. I want this scene to convey the kind of relationship these two have. They aren't buddy-buddies, but they aren't exactly bitter enemies either. But rivals wouldn't exactly be an accurate term either. The two have a pretty complicated relationship and dynamic, but are shown to mostly be on friendly terms with each other. Anyway, Sonic runs off while pondering something Shadow said about an ancient artifact. He eventually makes it to Tails' workshop and tries to see what's bothering him. He jokingly asks how many workshops Tails has. Tails comments that he has plenty. He set this one up a while ago to explore the underground labyrinth and whatever civilization inhabited the island. Sonic asks what's bugging Tails, and he makes a comment on coming to South Island because Eggman was planning something, and the fact that he went down so easily doesn't sit right with him. He then vents his frustrations that Sonic didn't listen to his many warnings before attacking Eggman. Sonic apologizes and explains how he just got caught up in the heat of the fight. He then promises to make it up to Tails by buying the new volume of his favorite comic once all the stuff with Eggman is done. Tails, while still a little frustrated, noticeably perks up, which invites a warm smile from Sonic. Then the rest of the scene plays out normally with Tails discovering that it was a trap, and Rouge makes her presence known and explains the Paradox Prism. Sonic comments on seeing both her and Shadow on the island and wonders where Omega is, and she simply laments that he's a tough bot to track down when you really want to. But anyway, she encourages Sonic to get the rest of his crew together so they can find Eggman. Sonic clocks the fact that she wouldn't do this out of the kindness of her own heart and asks what's in it for her. She makes it known it was just a mission assigned to her, but she sneakily hides the fact that she plans on taking the gem into her own personal care. Sonic can sense that she's hiding her true motivations, but doesn't pay any mind to it. Amy then contacts Tails on his computer to let them know that the clouds surrounding the mountains aren't moving naturally. With that, Sonic, Tails, and Rouge tell him to meet them at the top of the loop-de-loop so they can debrief and investigate together. We get to them all at the top of the loop-de-loop, and Amy frustratingly comments on thinking it was over. She's upset that she likely won't be able to make it to the picnic she planned to have with Big, Cream, and Vanilla. Anyway, Sonic races off to collect some rings before the fight. Yeah, I'm keeping the rings in this rewrite because I didn't have a better idea to get Sonic alone for his fight with Shadow. If you have any suggestions, let me know. Like in the base show, while he's roaming around, he gets knocked by Shadow. The rest of the gang by this point are already starting to take care of Eggman's badniks. Shadow tells Sonic that he knows about the gang planning to face off against Eggman again, and he intends on making sure Sonic doesn't make it to the battle. You see, like in the base show, by the time Shadow found the Chaos Emerald, he got hit with the Shockwave, and the Emerald gave him a vision of the near future, with Sonic at the center of a world of nothing but shattered crystals. He senses something bad will happen if Sonic makes it to the fight, so he plans on either beating him into submission or killing him if he has to. He doesn't disclose any of this info with Sonic, however, and to those wondering why he doesn't, it's the same reason in Sonic X why he didn't tell any of the gang why he was going to kill Cosmo. It doesn't matter because his mind has already been made up. Sonic is annoyed that Shadow is distracting him from helping his friends, but then very cockily says that beating him and making it to Eggman should be a piece of cake. The two then duke it out like in the base show. And Sonic, while knowing it's important to get to Eggman, still takes the time to have this bout with Shadow. This particular characteristic is going to become very important for this rewrite later on. Anyway, Sonic gets the jump on Shadow and races towards Eggman, with Shadow following far behind him. The fight inside the cave plays out the same as in the base show, with Sonic again not listening to anyone's warnings, shattering the prism. When Sonic hits the prism, it creates a giant shockwave that encompasses all of South Island, and then quickly spreads throughout the rest of the world. We see a shot of Big and Froggy on their own fishing as it moves towards them. It then shows the Chaotix on Angel Island as they get enveloped by it. Cream and Vanilla, as well as their Chow, Cheese, and Chocola, get swallowed by the shockwave, and Omega flying over a random city gets caught in it as well. The whole world gets enveloped by the crystallized shockwave. Cut to black. And so ends the first episode of my Sonic Prime rewrite. There is quite a bit I want to go over before continuing on with the rest of the show. A lot of decisions and further details for y'all to see where my head is at before we continue on. Firstly, yes, my rewrite does start off taking place in Green Hill, but I wanted to make it perfectly clear that Green Hill isn't the only place on South Island, and it also isn't the only location, period. All of these guys came here for one reason or another, and don't just live here like in the OG show. For example, in the OG show, one of the flashbacks detailed Knuckles being from Angel Island, so I wanted to make it clear that he only left there to help out with whatever big thing Eggman had been planning. I also wanted to make it known that other characters exist in this world too. I made the conscious effort to have characters mention Cream, Vanilla, the Chaotix, Omega, Big, etc. Just to show that this is a big world that's lived in. Also for another reason we'll get into later, but I'm sure you'll be able to figure it out before then. Shadow, when it comes to this rewrite, is something I've been really looking forward to, because while I love Shadow, the two problems I had with him in the OG show was not only his lack of screen time, but also because it is a kid's show, it felt like Shadow was kind of held back just a bit in his more darker and ruthless nature. While some may disagree, Shadow attempting to kill Sonic before he potentially dooms the world is so fucking cool to me, and I thought it'd be neat to go further into that route. And in this rewrite, we're going all the way with Shadow's darker characteristics, and I can't wait for you guys to see what I mean. The other characters as well, I think needed a bit more. I wanted to take the opportunity to show the many characteristics of our main characters that would likely come into play later. I apologize if I can't properly convey what's going on in my head when I envision this stuff, but I'd really like for stuff like Knuckles' honor and nobility, Amy's compassionate and nurturing heart, as well as her love for Sonic, Rouge's shady nature and Tails' childlike wonderment to all be pushed to the forefront before we get into the thick of it. Like maybe during the whole cleanup scene, I could showcase Amy being really frustrated that Eggman's shenanigans always seems to leave nature in ruins. Or during the mountain fight, have Rouge playfully taunt Knuckles, saying that if things get too hairy, he can always just run back to his island. And maybe Knucks says something back like he never backs down from a fight or whatever. Just little stuff like that sprinkled in, which allows for the audience to really get an idea for what makes these guys tick. And the different aspects of what makes their personalities so interesting. Stuff like Eggman's cunning genius, his slight childish behavior, and egotistical theatrics will all play a key role in pretty obvious ways if you've seen the show. I just like to push that stuff more to the forefront so it becomes more interesting. Something else that's a little harder to convey is Sonic's attitude. When writing this, I came from the perspective of asking, how would Game Sonic react to all of this stuff going on? In here, compared to the base show, Sonic still has a bit of his go-with-the-flow attitude. He doesn't spend much time at first thinking about the bigger picture, and is primarily a focus on the here and now kind of guy. And you'll see what I mean the further we go. Also, another thing that'll be kind of harder to convey is how Sonic himself fights. In my rewrite, I'd like Sonic to be portrayed as a more competent fighter, and what better way to get that point across than in his fight with Shadow. In the base show, Sonic routinely gets his ass handed to him, and while I'm not opposed to my main character going through struggles, all Prime did was just make Sonic look overly incompetent. So in my rewrite, and this may take a little bit of imagination on your guys' part, I'd like to have Sonic, in comparison to Shadow, have his speed highlighted more. Like in just a few subtle ways to where it doesn't feel like he's completely outclassed by the Black Hedgehog. While Shadow in my rewrite, and again, this may take a bit of imagination from you guys, has abilities like Chaos Spear, Snap, Control, Blast, etc., Sonic I'd give stuff like his Insta-Shield, his Sonic Wave attack, Lightspeed Dash, Sonic Wind, and hell, even Sonic Boom too, why not? As well as lean into more wind and tornado-based attacks, and throw in some after-image shenanigans too, because why not? I'm throwing all of this in because I just think it'd be cool to see Sonic use this stuff against Shadow. Like if y'all remember, when the Sonic Movie 3 Twitter account released one of the posters, one of the taglines they tweeted it with is like, when speed and power collide or something like that. And for the sake of my rewrite, I kind of wanted to emphasize that here just because I think that's really fucking cool. Especially since in the show, they make it seem like Sonic is a complete bitch compared to Shadow. And even though Shadow is my boy, we can't have that here. The Shadow glazing has to be put on pause, at least for a while. Not to mention that, again, just having Sonic do shit like this in the show would be really cool. And make a lot of the fight scenes, including the ones with Shadow, feel way more dynamic. Okay, going forward, for both mine and your sake, I'm going to try not to go too in detail with all the events that go down in these episodes. I just went all in with this episode in particular, because a lot of this lays the groundwork for the rewrite as a whole. Now, on to episode 2. Like the base show, Sonic wakes up pretty confused as to where he is and what exactly led him to this weird new city. He roams around fighting and avoiding these egg forcers while trying to deal with the weird energy that encompasses his body. And eventually he would figure out that this place is none other than a taken over Green Hill. But not just that, the entirety of South Island is nothing but a giant dystopian city, with industrialized landscapes slowly but surely expanding over the ocean line, and a faint but very visible energy-based dome looming over the entire island. Everything involving Sonic meeting 9 basically remains the same, even Sonic still not piecing together this is an alternate reality. Sonic ponders for a sec that maybe it's some kind of time travel thing, and comments how it wouldn't be the first time the dog tried something like that. But even if that is the case, something still feels off. People harp on Sonic not figuring this out in time, but I kinda like the slow buildup of the mystery as to what exactly happened to this place. Except I'd change a bit of dialogue so there's no confusion between the two when Sonic mentions Eggman, as well as present 9 as being a bit more chipper and excited when hearing Sonic describe his adventures with Tails. Okay, this next bit is where I'm going to be making a lot more changes, mainly in regards to the Resistance and who are fighting against the Chaos Council. The Resistance is led by none other than Rebel Rouge. And no one else. Yeah, in my rewrite, Renegade Knucks is completely out of the equation, for a multitude of reasons, but one of which being, I feel like having 3 different versions of each of our individual Prime cast members across the Shadowverse is just a bit redundant. At most, in my rewrite, each character will get about 1 or 2 variants, with a few exceptions. Another reason for Knucks not being here is because it makes another character's role just carry a bit more weight. Not to mention that, yeah, he doesn't really add too much. That's not to say that certain characters don't exist, as I'd imagine Knucks in the New Yoke Dimension does exist somewhere, probably still on Angel Island most likely. Considering that the New Yoke Dimension is the only one that directly reflects the Prime reality, a bulk of the characters' backstories stay relatively the same. Except for Rouge. You see, I wanted to keep her original story of her being a spy for the government intact for this story, to keep in line with characters like Nine's story being relatively the same, just minus Sonic. But the more I tried getting into it, the more convoluted and nonsensical it got. So for this rewrite, Rouge is very much just a treasure hunter who just so happened to be on the island looking for some precious jewels, when the Chaos Council would eventually make their move, effectively trapping her on the island. So Rouge, with very little choice over time, band a resistance together to try and stop the Council and release her from this prison. Eventually, Sonic and Nine get captured and are introduced to Rusty Rose. She's about the same as she is in the base show, as I thought she was a pretty fun character. Sonic, at the sight of Amy, is at first horrified, but then quickly becomes absolutely furious and promises to make Eggman pay and whatnot. She then finally introduces Sonic to the Chaos Council, Doctors Eggman, Deep, and Deviled. And I really contemplated on keeping all 5 for this rewrite, because, unpopular opinion, I thought ones like the Baby were really fun, but I ultimately opted to just have 3 council members for the sake of me being able to better navigate and have all 3 consistently doing something, whereas in the OG show, it'd often show only 3 of the council members in battle, while the other 2 kinda just didn't do much. But also, I think they work really well as just being a trio, which is something the Sonic series is obsessed with. And yes, I changed their names to be more egg-based because their names in the show friggin' sucked. The names I picked may not have been that much more creative, I am aware. Deep is the only one that was strangely appropriate though, so I kept his name the same. Anyway, in my rewrite, it's made a bit more obvious from the bits we saw of Eggman in the first episode. Eggman contains Prime Eggman's genius cunning, Deep has his theatrics, as well as a bit of his ambivalence, and Deviled has his more angry, psychotic, and intense side. Folks were kind of confused as to why the different Eggmen weren't related, even though, thinking about it, it kind of makes sense. Both Sonic and Eggman were at point-blank range of the Shatter event, so it kind of makes sense why they'd be affected by it differently, with there being no other Sonic in the entire Shatterverse, and all the Eggman variants housing one single universe. Anyway, with their introduction, Sonic says he'll crack each of them wide open for what they did to Amy, and Devil retorts with, why? They finally perfected her. She's a success compared to all the others, he growls. He hits a button to show a wall that features a bunch of South Island residents strung up with a bunch of robot parts mashed into them, but very much still alive, and just looking absolutely miserable. Think like the Reanimant from Invincible, but less gory, you know? Sonic then becomes even more furious and tries to break his restraints, but ultimately ends up failing. The Council, curious of Sonic's mysterious energy, runs tests, and this plays out the same as it did in the base show, right down to Sonic in the sphere running around. While running, he sees a silhouette fast approaching him, and he hears a familiar voice, though he can't quite pin it just yet. The voice yells at Sonic that, "It's you! You destroyed everything!" Before he can think on what he just heard, he sets off a shockwave throughout the island, giving Rouge and a small group of rebels the chance to infiltrate the Council's base, the Yoke. The rest plays out as normal with Rouge and the rebels infiltrating the base, causing a fight to ensue. Sonic, while dizzy and dazed at first, quickly gets himself together and begins a fight with Rusty Rose. Nine eventually gets control of her, and the Council flees the scene. Sonic playfully remarks that it's unlike Rouge to be the Resistance leader type. She's pretty confused by this comment, in response by giving her backstory I mentioned just a bit ago, with her getting trapped on the island with that barrier the Council put over it. After explaining herself, she gets down to business. She's seen what Sonic is capable of, and thinks that he's the key to stopping the Chaos Council. They've managed to slow down the spread of their metallic empire only slightly, and further explains that whatever the Council used to transform the island is likely to spread further throughout the rest of the world. She begs Sonic to help defeat the Council and free the island and its people. Sonic, listening to all of this, then pauses. He still wants to get to the bottom of why there are multiple Eggmen running around. He at first thought it was some sort of time travel shenanigans at play here, but seeing the multiple doctors just confirmed that there's something even weirder going on here. But he quickly puts all of that to the side and decides to join and help the Resistance take down the Council. Sonic, Rusty, Rouge, Nine, and the other rebels make their way throughout the Yoke. Nine mentions something about a power source that the Chaos Council uses. Sonic, thinking it's probably the Paradox Prism, encourages everyone to book it to the core. The Council in their control room catches the surveillance of Sonic's forces heading to the core. Eggman concernedly exclaims that those vermin are heading for the core. "If they get their hands on our energy supply, all the work we've put into our conquest will be for nothing! We need to skin those rodents before it's too late!" Deep then interjects, saying that there's little need to worry. "Why don't we put our ultimate weapon to the ultimate test?" he says. As Deep pushes a button, a glass wall rises with an ominous smoke pouring out of it. Once Sonic and Co. get near the core, they're intercepted by the Chaos Council's Egg Forcers, but notably, they are led by the Council's elite Egg Forcer, none other than E123 Omega. A huge battle ensues with the Egg Forcers and the Rebels, with Sonic taking notice that Omega is the one leading the attack, but something is very different about him. He's significantly taller, with much more noticeable firepower attached to him. So in the scuffle, Sonic taunts Omega that a bot like him working for someone, let alone the Council, was pretty pathetic. Omega pays no mind to Sonic's words, and boasts about being the elite Egg Forcer and the world's most powerful creation. Sonic can't help but to let out a slight smirk at Omega's retort. Man, no wonder you and Shadow get along so well. Before engaging in a fight with Omega. And in my mind, it'd be a pretty heated one. A fight with Omega and Sonic is something I've wanted for ages, and it'd be really cool to see them go ham against each other. After some time, Sonic's crew managed to evade the Egg Forcers and make it to the core, where Eggman snatches Rusty and Rouge, as well as detaining the other rebels, while Sonic and Nine remain in the room with the core. The scene plays out relatively the same, but with Rouge telling Sonic to go after the shard, I want there to be less hesitation and more determination from him. Like, instead of needing Nine to hold him back from trying to save them, he just quickly agrees and rushes to the shard. As Sonic runs to it, he quickly notices something. It's significantly smaller than what he remembers, and that's when Sonic properly pieces things together. He remembers the fight with Eggman and attacking the prism, which in turn likely caused all of this. Sonic is just left frozen, realizing the mistake he made, but Nine quickly snaps him out of it. Sonic relays to him what he just figured out, but Nine says they'll figure all of this out later, and they need to hurry up and grab the shard. And as such, Sonic attempts to grab it. But as he does, he feels himself getting sucked into it. Nine leaps to try and grab him, but Sonic is quickly sucked into the prism, leaving Nine in a state of shock and confusion. Ending episode 2. Okay, another brief interlude before we get into episode 3. If it already wasn't clear, something I wanted to add to the Chaos Council's whole plan here was to have them try and expand their reach out to the rest of the world. Like in the IDW Sonic comics, there was an arc called Eggperial City, where Eggman was siphoning the resources from the land in order to make a living, growing, and expanding city that theoretically would eventually consume the world. That idea was so cool, but done away with so quickly in the comic, that I thought it'd be neat to add that to the Doctor's overarching goal, instead of having them settle for this one random-ass island. I see no reason why 3 Eggmen wouldn't try to use the reality-bending power of the Prism Shard to try and expand their empire. And if you couldn't tell, yes, all the New York stuff does go down within a single episode. I think streamlining some stuff in these earlier episodes would help with the show's overall pacing, especially as we get into the following episodes. And yes, I did take the liberty of adding E123 Omega to the story, and having him play a key role in the Chaos Council's army. Omega is just a really fun character to me, and I think it would have been really cool to have him actually be in the show. But the stuff I have him do in the rewrite I think is pretty neat, and I can't wait for y'all to see that. But with all that out of the way, let's hop into episode 3, where we're going to be seeing a few more changes. The next episode starts with us following a group of characters through a dark jungle. We don't see them in full, they're just silhouettes. As they're sneaking around, one hears a branch snap, and they all stop in their tracks. We then get a POV of something rushing towards them, and all we hear is a screeching sound before it all cuts to black. We get a shot of Sonic falling from the sky and landing flat on his face. After a few seconds, he shoots back up, takes a sec to catch his breath, and begins surveying his surroundings. He looks out and sees nothing but intense brush and wilderness. Ugh, what just happened? Where even am I right now? He asks before exclaiming, well, I ain't gonna find out by just standing here, as he takes off and rushes through the jungle. He runs for a few seconds before hearing a twig snap nearby, and he stops in his tracks. He listens briefly, and as he's standing, a big, purple cat, with a little frog on his shoulder, leaps out and attempts to attack him with a spear. Confused, Sonic shouts out, Big? Froggy? The large cat responds, I know I'm big. You don't have to be so mean about it. Before going back to attacking Sonic, Sonic quickly deals a homing attack to briefly stop Big from attacking him, but from within the bushes, he hears someone shout, Now! As 2 rabbits lunge towards him, followed by 2 little Chow, one rabbit with a spear and another smaller one with a bow and arrow. Sonic, once again confused, shouts, Cream? Vanilla? Wait, hold on a sec! As he tries to evade the barrage of attacks, he quickly blitzes around and knocks all of the attackers to the ground. While they try to recuperate, Sonic says he's not here to hurt anyone. The tall rabbit apologizes as they thought Sonic had been working with the monster and just went on the offense. She asks him why he called them those names when they jumped out at him, though. Sonic just says, You all Look like some folks I know. Then he introduces himself as Sonic, Sonic the Hedgehog. The big cat introduces himself as Hangry. And the two rabbits, I'm gonna be honest, I'm not creative enough to give them weird prehistoric names, so if y'all have suggestions, let me know. But for the remainder of this video, I'm gonna just refer to them as Cream and Vanilla, as well as the chow being cheese and chocola. Cream explains that there hasn't been much food to go around with the monster that's been terrorizing them. Sonic, while having concerns for his friends in New York in the back of his mind, offers to help deal with the monster. The scavengers roam around the jungle with Sonic, leading him to where the monster usually hides around. Sonic says he'll take it from here, and the rest can head back to where it's safe. Before the gang heads back, Cream and the two Chow express excessive amounts of thanks and gratitude, and hope Sonic will make it out safe. Sonic runs on into the jungle, just roaming the area, before he hears a loud screeching noise. But before he can even react, he's hoisted off of the ground several feet into the air, and quickly slammed back down. He turns over to see what the heck just happened, and he turns to see a giant Flicky screeching in his face. So I guess this is the monster they were talking about. Alright, Big Birdie, let's see what you got. The bird then soars into the air, and what commences in my head is a pretty fun chase sequence. One where Sonic is evading all the hazards of the jungle, and the birdie is leading him to all different sorts of traps and throwing various hazards at him, not too dissimilar from certain bosses in the games. And it's within this chase that Sonic discovers the upgrades 9 gave him has given him these claws on his gloves and shoes. Unbeknownst to Sonic, however, the birdie is intentionally leading him deeper into the jungle, and it eventually disappears into the trees. Sonic is pretty confused. "Hey, what happened? I thought we were having fun," he says, pretty irritated, until a voice cuts through. "You did good, Birdie." A pink hedgehog wielding a giant hammer leaps from out the trees. "Amy?" Sonic says with a hint of excitement, but the pink hedgehog corrects him and introduces herself as Thorn Rose. Sonic, slightly disappointed, goes on to question Thorn. He asks why she and Birdie have been keeping everyone out of the jungle and away from the food and resources. It's then here where we get the big backstory, where Thorn explains how she has always loved and cherished the green. And then we'd get a flashback of sorts that showcases the scavengers overindulging and never giving back to the land they take from. But in this flashback, you don't see Big, Cream, Vanilla, and the Chow. In this rewrite, Thorn has yet to meet them, and she's just thwarting off random anthro-animal characters, as she's just been working to remove all the people from the land and aims to let the green survive and flourish. Sonic, while empathetic for her love for nature, can't sit back and allow Thorn to let the others starve, and so begrudgingly from Sonic's end, they engage in another brief scuffle. After a while they stop, as Thorn takes notice of Sonic's shoes, but more particularly, their glow. This is where she explains the tale of the Great Green, a force in the jungle so powerful it can reshape all of nature itself. She's never seen it, as anyone who's attempted to look for it almost seems to get misdirected by the vast and overgrown jungle. Sonic, realizing it's likely a prism shard, tries to strike up a deal with Thorn. If he finds the Great Green for her, she'll have to let the other scavengers live their lives in the jungle. She seemingly agrees as they make their way deeper into the jungle. They roam around for a good while, with it seeming like the forest reacting to Sonic's shoes, opening up a bit of a pathway for them, leading to the Great Green. They eventually find a giant palm tree with a glow at the base of it. Sonic digs up the shard, and then is ultimately struck by Thorn. Sonic is surprised and annoyed, and asks what her problem is. She explains that with the power of the Great Green, she can properly shut out all of the scavengers. They then embark on a pretty big chase that's not too dissimilar from the base show. Thorn begins to sprout branches out of the ground, which then shoot out of the tree line, which gains the attention of our scavengers from afar. Cream thinks that Sonic might be in trouble, and begs her mother to go and try to help him, with the two Chow eagerly backing her up. She at first disagrees, but seeing her daughter's plea and determination, lets out a warm smile and agrees to help. She, along with Cream, the Chow, and Hangry, make their way deeper into the jungle. We cut back to Sonic, Thorn, and Birdie, still pretty heated in their chase. It goes on for a bit until the scavengers cut through the trees. When Thorn takes sight of them, she's filled with anger as she thinks they're here to take more from the jungle. She knocks Sonic out of the way with her hammer, and with a strike to the ground with the powered-up weapon, she sends a giant spike towards the scavengers. Sonic, in a hurry, blitzes and spin dashes the spike, and turns with as much momentum as he can, dashes down the spike at full speed, crashing into Thorn and Birdie, which sends the hammer flying through the tree line. Thorn is defeated. Her and Birdie very meekly try to stand up on their feet, with Sonic and the other scavengers standing before them. Vanilla asks what's going on, and Sonic explains that their monster problem is none other than Thorn. Vanilla is puzzled on how to deal with this, but then goes and attempts to comfort her. I don't have a big idea for what the dialogue would entail, but it'd basically amount to the scavengers trying to appeal to Thorn over her obsession with preserving the green. before they ultimately agree that all of them together can make a more lively and fluorescent jungle that all can live in peacefully without needing for such conflict. I'd throw in a cute little moment with her and Cream, and Hangry can maybe get a line or two, and it'd generally be a nice little cute ending, with these folks forming a family of sorts, with them letting Thorn and Birdie join in. But if they're going to get to work on restoring the green properly, they're going to need to get that shard. Sonic, pretty eager to help them out, rushes in the direction to where he thinks the hammer landed. As he's running through the jungle, he looks a bit chipper, thinking about all that went down, but then his face starts to settle and looks a bit disappointed. He encounters another troubled Amy, and as such, he thinks about the Amy he knows. Then that circles into him thinking about the rest of his friends, and whenever he'll be able to see them again. While lost in thought, a familiar voice calls to him. "You! Don't stop! Keep running!" Sonic, before he can fully realize who it is speaking to him, trips before landing on the shard, sending him away and ending episode 3. A problem I've had with Sonic Prime in hindsight is that, relatively speaking, the show doesn't really keep things that interesting once you leave New York City. I and a few others find the other Shatter Spaces not to be as interesting by comparison. Now, there were a few interesting things here and there, like the stuff that went on in the boss cage touched on the slight environmentalism themes of the Sonic franchise, which I personally appreciated. But as a whole, it's quite apparent how lacking the other spaces are. So I tried to remedy this by at the very least having a new cast of characters to follow in each world. Relatively speaking, of course, because of Thorn, Rose, and whatnot. But adding in Big, Cream, Vanilla, the Chow, all just felt really fitting. And you'll probably notice I omitted characters like Gnarly, Prim, and Mangy. And I did that because, to put it plainly, I didn't think they really served that much of a purpose. Mangy didn't add anything, Prim was fine in the base show. But I think another alternate version of Rouge can be better utilized elsewhere. And Gnarly is basically just a male version of Styx, except less funny. I also wanted to have a few of the alternate characters properly reflect their prime counterparts. Kind of like how in the storybook games, despite having alternate versions of our cast, they still very much feel like our cast. And I mainly want to do this because if you're someone watching Sonic Prime with little to no knowledge of the overarching Sonic franchise, the show doesn't do that great of a job establishing all of these guys and what makes them tick. So I wanted to remedy this in my rewrite. So, with that out of the way, on to episode 4. The episode this time begins with a flashback, long before the prison shatter. In the flashback, it details a little get-together Amy is setting up for Cream, Cheese, Vanilla, Tails, and of course, her darling Sonic. Sonic is the last to arrive, with Amy presenting him with a flower. Sonic's appreciative of it, but Amy tries to explain the significance behind it, that it's a special flower that only ever blooms around Never Lake, the spot where they first met. And before anyone tells me they met on Little Planet, I'm writing it this way for simplicity's sake, and for the sake of this rewrite, try to remember nothing in the games that happened up to this point is exactly one-to-one. But anyway, when she tries to go into the emotional significance, he thanks Amy but playfully writes it off, just playing it off as Amy's overly lovey-dovey antics, and goes to check up on Cream, Cheese, and Vanilla to see how they're doing. Amy is pretty visibly disappointed, and Tails takes notice, and tries to reassure her that Sonic definitely does appreciate the gift, but just doesn't see things beyond face value. Amy pretty somberly says, yeah, in agreement, before perking herself back up as she and Tails join Sonic and the others to continue having fun. We then cut to present time after Sonic touches the Prism Shard in the boss cage maze. Sonic shoots through a portal falling through the sky yet again. This time he's met with a large body of water. Panicking, he tries to steer himself to a small piece of land, but just barely makes it onto shore. He's knocked out from the landing, and he slowly comes to from the sound of 2 voices.
Wow, who be this landlubber? I don't know, but he sure be cute. What? He heard what I said.
Tails? Amy? He asks, before the 2 correct him and introduce themselves as Sails and Black Rose, 2 pirate versions of Tails and Amy. Sonic disappointingly says, figures, as he remembers the whole situation he's in and just rolls with it. He looks around and sees nothing but water as far as the eye can see. He asks where he is, and they welcome him to the No Place. They explain that their captain saw him land from afar and would like to speak with him. Sonic is at first apprehensive in meeting some random captain and turns to run away, but then sees he has literally nowhere to go and hesitantly goes along with Sails and Black Rose. When they make it to the ship, Sonic remarks how there's no one here. Sails explains that for a while it's just been him, Rose, and the captain. Sonic pokes fun at it being a pretty small crew. Black Rose chimes in with a bit of an attitude about how there used to be others. But before she can speak any further, a voice calls out to them. It's the captain welcoming them aboard. He then lands before them, and it's revealed the captain is none other than Knuckles. Sonic is of course shocked as he has yet to meet Knuckles in any of the worlds he's ventured to thus far, but also because he never struck Knucks as a leader type. I'd imagine he whispered to himself, and I thought Rouge leading a rebellion was the craziest thing I'd seen. The captain then introduces himself as Captain Knuckles the Dread. Dread demands Sonic tells him what just happened. He's never seen anyone up and fall out of a hole from the sky, and wants answers. Sonic, not appreciating his tone, would put up a cheeky stance in handing over the information. The two would naturally have a tense back and forth, as Sonic and Knuckles tend to have, before Sonic eventually tells him his story up to this point. We transition to later in the day, with Sails and Rose looking in awe as Sonic finishes his story. Dread looks surprised at the tale Sonic just spelled. Sails remarks on how cool Sonic sounded from the adventure he's had up till now, and I'd imagine we throw in some slight flirting from Black Rose, because why not? Dread tells Sonic that the shards he made mention of remind him of what he and his crew have spent ages searching for, the Devil's Lighthouse, a fabled mythical place not known or discovered by many. Dread himself had been searching for it for years before forming his current crew. He laments how it feels like the lighthouse calls to him, how he's destined to find and discover it. Sonic, hearing this, gets excited and tells the crew that he'll help them find the lighthouse as he needs it to find his way back home. Sonic and the crew then begin to party the rest of the night before embarking on their journey the following day. We cut to the crew sailing through the seas as Sonic explains if they follow the glow in his shoes, it should lead them to the lighthouse. In the meantime, I'd like for this moment to allow for a brief heart-to-heart between Sonic and Dread, where Dread expresses his appreciation for his crew. Sails may be young, but he's smart as a whip and just as dependable. Black Rose may be a bit bratty, but her compassion and heart more than make up for it. I'm not gonna always be doing the pirate speak. You niggas are gonna have to use your imagination on that front. They've helped him back on his feet in the darkest of times, and he doesn't know what he'd do without them. Sonic, listening to this, laments that he knows exactly what he means, and that his friends are just the same. The past few days he's been going through the motions, but every once in a while he thinks of them, and how he wants to get back to them. I throw in a comment from Dread about appreciating these guys while they're here, because who knows what may happen one day. Sonic hears this and a somber look overtakes his face. They're then interrupted when Sails calls out to let the captain know of an approaching ship. He looks out with his telescope and a look of shock covers his entire face. A bead of sweat rolls down as he yells for Sails and Rose to get into battle formations. Sonic asks what's going on. Dread tells him they'll be under attack soon and to prepare himself. He runs towards Sails and Rose to get their 2 cents on things. Black Rose reminds Sonic of the others she tried to mention the previous day. It's old members of the crew coming to attack them. They had a big falling out with Dread that resulted in them disbanding, and every once in a while they pop back up to steal whatever food or supplies they have. Sonic, after hearing this, gets pretty excited about the prospect of some conflict. His excitement, in turn, makes Sails feel more confident, and can't help but make Rose swoon for him even more. Dread tells him to prepare as the ship fast approaches. The ship pulls to the side as the four prepare for battle. There's a back and forth between the captain of the enemy ship and Dread, though the crew members of the other ship are out of frame. Just some exposition and arguing about each other being a coward and traitor and yada yada yada, you get it. But when Sonic sees the 3 crew members of the other ship, he's met with 3 familiar faces he really didn't expect to see. None other than Team Chaotix are attacking their crew. I don't have any pirate names for them, so like with the Scavengers, I'll be referring to them by their actual names. Sonic is in complete and utter shock at this sight, before quickly focusing as a battle is about to commence. And yeah, we get a pretty cool fight scene with them firing cannons and whatnot. Maybe Dread catches one and hurls it back at their ship. And maybe Sonic does a homing attack chain to take the fight to the Chaotix. Just some light action that takes place. But as it rolls along, there are some storm clouds that form overhead, and the ships slowly start to approach some rock formations. Sails and Espio each work their way to steer their respective ships out of the way of the rocks. Eventually the fight ends with the Chaotix ship being stuck between the formations, and Dread's crew make their escape. Some time passes after the whole scuffle, and Sonic asks Dread what the deal was with the other crew. This is where we get the backstory of them trying to make their way to the lighthouse, and due to Dread and Vector's bickering over navigations, they ended up losing their ship, and it resulted in them disbanding. Sails and Black Rose stuck by Dread and helped him resettle and build a new ship, and the 2 crews have been bitter rivals ever since. After this explanation, we transition to the pirate Chaotix, as they've cleared their ship of the mess they were left in and attempt to follow Dread's crew to wherever it is they're going. We get some slight banter to show off more of their personalities. Charmy could poke fun at how badly Vector made them lose, with the Croc angrily telling the bee to buzz off, with Espio attempting to be more level-headed about their plan if and when they reach Dread. They almost lost their ship in the whole skirmish, and at least some of the time they managed to make a getaway with at least some of Dread's food and supplies. but that's primarily because of it being a 3-on-3. With Sonic in the mix and putting up as good as a fight as he did, they're at a disadvantage. Vector tries to tell Espio that so long as the three are well coordinated, they'll show Dread's crew what's what. Charmy comedically jabs in that they'll have to if they're ever going to want to pay their debt to that mean old Captain Jack. Vector tries to play off Espio's warnings, but deep in the back of his mind, he probably knows his chameleon comrade is right. That is when something or someone catches his eye in the sky. It's not made clear who this individual is to the audience, but they land in front of Vector as he sails. They playfully remark about how it's been a long time since they've seen the three. Vector quickly gets aggravated and asks them what they want. They explain that they were nearby when they saw the altercation between the two pirate crews. Once they took notice of Dread making it clear of the formations, they briefly took chase to see where it was they were heading. They deduce that Dread is probably trying to find the fabled lighthouse again. Vector sighs and remarks how typical it is that he's after that thing once again. The mysterious figure aims to strike a deal with the Croc. If they lend their services to the crew, and they end up defeating Dread and making it to the lighthouse, they can split whatever profits await there 50-50. After a brief pep talk with Espio and Charmy, where they discuss how shady this individual's track record is. They're smart enough to not put their full faith in them, but Vector sees it as a way of leveling the playing field with the two crews, and while not fully trusting, agrees to let this mysterious character aboard. We transition to even later in the day, I'm sorry if it feels like we're jumping around a lot, to Dread's crew as they seem to be approaching the lighthouse. It's a bright light that sits atop a mountain that shines over the horizon. Dread is in complete and utter awe that he's found it. He's finally found it. The lighthouse is still quite a bit of ways away, so as Sonic and Co are steadily approaching, a cannonball fires past their ship. Everyone turns and sees Vector's crew. While a good distance away, they're still close enough to cause trouble. Sonic expresses a bit of frustration at their return, but quickly gets an idea. He begins spinning behind the main flag to create a tornado that'll likely give him enough of a speed boost to reach the lighthouse. As this happens, Vector takes notice from afar and sends Espio, Charmy, and the mysterious figure to hurry and slow them down so that he can make it to the lighthouse. The three soar through the air until they crash into Sonic, slowing the ship down a tad. Dread turns around to meet the sight of the other crew members, and is shocked to see none other than Rouge the Bat, or Baton Rouge. Sonic looks up to see them, and actually isn't super surprised this time, as a pirate version of Rouge just makes too much sense. Here's where we get a little bit of a back and forth between Dread and Baton, hinting at the little flirtatious side to their dynamic, with Sails and Rose explaining to Sonic that Baton had been a rogue pirate who had persistently been harassing the crew, consistently stealing the treasures they've acquired, or following them and swooping treasures they were hunting right as they claimed them. Even as far back as when the Chaotix were still a part of Dread's crew, she's been doing this. Dread is furious that the Chaotix would work with someone like her. Espio exclaims it's nothing more than to settle the score. A brief fight breaks out, and over the course of it, Dread catches onto it being a distraction, and notices Vector's ship has gotten far ahead of them. Dread leaps from the ship and begins gliding towards Vector to stop him before he reaches the lighthouse. Baton quickly makes chase after him and intercepts him on a small landmass. He exclaims that he won't let her take this treasure away from him. She snaps back at him about not letting him take the treasure away from her, as she proudly proclaims that all of the world's treasures are hers to keep. They begin a brief tussle which results in Dread winning and rushing towards the lighthouse. Back on Dread's ship, Charmy and Espio quickly deduce that they can't beat Sonic, Sails, and Rose on their own, and make a break for their captain's ship. But Sonic quickly homing attacks the two, knocking them out. Sonic and Co then attempt to make it to Dread, not before tying Charmy and Espio up, of course. We eventually get to a point where Dread and Vector make it to the summit of the lighthouse. They begin to climb the mountain while still duking it out, of course. They make it quite a bit of ways up and eventually meet at the top and see a giant prism shard. They both grab and fight over it, which leads to them trading blows and eventually knocking each other off the mountain. Vector stumbles down quite a bit, but gets caught on a ledge and is ultimately knocked out from hitting his head while falling. Dread, however, keeps tumbling down with the shard in his hands, unable to stop himself. Sonic notices this and jumps off the ship to try and catch Dread, but he moved too fast and forgot about the endless body of water below him. And as he thinks he's about to be completely submerged, here is where he becomes aware of his hover shoes in this world, and he quickly races off towards Dread, who continues to tumble, and with the shard still carefully cradled in his hands, is unable to stop his momentum. Sonic keeps running, even adding in some lightspeed dashes here and there, and just before Dread reaches the ground, Sonic swoops in and catches him, but as he does, the prism shard flies up and knocks Sonic on the head, sending him away. The episode comes to a close with Dread picking up the shard and letting out a loud, proud, and slightly crazed victorious laugh. I'm sorry if this one felt a bit sloppier than the previous one. As you can probably tell by now with all these introductory episodes for the Shatter Spaces, I kind of try to make it all fit into a single episode, as I feel like doing multiple is just a tad redundant. Now, the Chaotix inclusion just felt too right for me not to do. In the OG show, they mentioned an old crew, only for it to turn out to be a bunch of random anthro animal niggas. I feel like this would have been a better opportunity to introduce these goofballs and give them beef with Knuckles. This Shatter Space, I think, as well could serve a neat purpose, which is to better reflect Sonic's friends, their personalities, as well as his relationships with them. To properly showcase Amy's passionate heart, bratty nature, as well as her love for Sonic with Black Rose, Tails' childlike nature with Sails, and Knuckles' nobility with Dread. I even wanted to tie in his connection to the Master Emerald with his search for the Prism Shard, as well as plant little seeds as to what Sonic's arc throughout this whole journey will end up being. These are all just ideas, and again, I apologize if I can't convey them correctly, but we gotta make our way into episode 5.
The episode begins back in New York City. We see the Chaos Council considerably troubled. They're without their energy supply, the rebels managed to escape, and they have yet to locate their whereabouts. But Dr. Eggman in particular is fixated on the blue hedgehog that just seemingly randomly appeared in their city. Where did he come from? How does he possess this power? And how can they harness it for themselves? The doctors continue to discuss how the hedgehog represents what they came together in hopes of destroying, the unruly and uncontrollable chaos of the world. Anything untamed and uncontrolled, they sought it to be theirs. It's why they started their conquest on this random island after acquiring the Prism Shard. They then make it a top priority to find and destroy the hedgehog, lest he ruins their plans. As this unfolds, Sonic shoots from a sky portal once again, and lands in the middle of the streets of New York. Sonic takes a brief second to recuperate, and realizes he's back in New York City. He's pretty confused, but quickly remembers Nine and the other rebels. He sneakily races across the city, making sure to avoid Egg Forcers, and attempt to make his way to the Council's Yoke base. He's unfortunately not stealthy enough, as several security cameras picks up blue streaks speeding by what the fuck, throughout the city streets. As he gets closer to the base, a swarm of Egg Forcers surround him, and an angry Dr. Devil shouts for them to take the hedgehog alive so that he can skin his blue coat himself. We cut to the Yoke base where Omega appears before the Council, asking them if he shall aid the Egg Forcers in capturing the blue hedgehog so that he may brutally maim him as well. Eggman cuts in and agrees to let him go, with some company to back him up, and he reveals Rusty Rose has joined the Council once again. Back in the city, the Egg Forcers give chase towards Sonic. We get a little fun chase sequence with Sonic dodging and evading their forces, which leads to Omega and Rusty intercepting them. Sonic asks what happened to Rusty, as the last time he saw her, Nine had overridden her controls. She tells Sonic the might of the Council's genius can't be so easily squandered. Omega interrupts her to commence his maiming on the hedgehog. We then get a brief fight, which is pretty cool, and it leads to a small aerial battle between Sonic and Omega. While briefly in the air, Sonic looks in the distance as a small, but noticeable, at least to him, blinking light shines in their direction, and he sees someone trying to wave him down. As he continues the battle, he would eventually run off in an attempt to escape the Council's forces, and head to the area he saw that mysterious figure try to flag him down. We'd get a brief little chase scene that results in Omega, Rusty, and the Egg Forcers losing Sonic. We'd see Sonic racing to a farther side of the island/city, and cut through and around different alleyways before comedically being yoinked down a large pipe. We'd go downward through the pipes, and it leads to this underground base of sorts, with Sonic coming face to face with none other than Rebel Rouge, with a few other Rebel soldiers pointing blasters at him. Rebel, pretty seriously, asks Sonic where he's been for the last few days. Sonic begins a brief rundown of the last few days for him, and Rebel then asks him where Nine is. Sonic is pretty confused, as he thought Nine would probably be with them. She explains that after the blackout from the Prism Shard being taken, she witnessed Nine leaving her, Rusty, and the other rebels behind, and just assumed that he and Sonic snuck away together. They only managed to escape due to a few civilians infiltrating the base after seeing Sonic and their efforts to fight against the Council. They rescued them in an attempt to join the resistance. Sonic explains further that he has no idea where Nine is, and is pretty distraught by the notion of him abandoning the rebels, but is pretty confident he'll turn up eventually. He starts to take in and look around the base, and sees that it's quite larger than he realized a few moments ago. It expands and goes on for what seems like miles. He takes a look at the walls and realizes something. This is the Underground Labyrinth, aka Labyrinth Zone, everyone's favorite level from Sonic 1, yay! Rebel explains how her and the other rebels managed to form a base of operations out of it over time as the doctors took over. She then asks Sonic to help in the fight against them. Without the shard, the island's mechanical expanse has been halted, and with enough effort, they can surely win against them. Sonic of course agrees, as he thinks usurping 3 megalomaniacal tyrants should be a great deal of fun. We then jump forward 2 weeks. Yeah, baby, we got a time skip going on, which for the sake of certain characters in the story is going to be quite funny to have this whole thing take place over the course of a couple weeks. If you've seen the show, you probably already know who I'm talking about. Anyway, I'd like to showcase a montage of Sonic and the Rebel forces taking on the Chaos Council. Some SAT-AM style operations with Sonic messing with the Doctors, facing off against them, as well as Omega and Rusty, getting captured once or twice and fighting alongside Rouge and such. Just something to show the ongoing battles between the two opposing forces. After the 2 weeks have passed, we see Sonic relaxing on a rooftop on the farther side of the island, intently listening in on a radio communicator. We'd get some dialogue from Rebel Rouge and Sonic going over everything that's gone down, the various battles, and their forces gradually expanding as more civilians join the Resistance. Another Resistance member sounds on the comm that they're preparing to initiate Operation Cheese. Rouge asks if Sonic is ready, and Sonic, of course, readies himself for the go-ahead. The Resistance leads a number of egg forces to a particular area and ambush them. Sonic would race across the island to lend his aid. A big battle ensues with Omega appearing and engaging with Sonic. The rebels anticipated the big bot's arrival and needed Sonic far away enough to not be spotted in order to intercept him. Sonic was also meant to ward off Rusty, who doesn't appear to be here, something Rouge takes notice of as she warns the others to be careful on the battlefield. We get a shot of Rusty in the distance just doing some surveillance on the fight. Eggman figured maybe they can learn something about their enemy's approach for future battles. The fight with the rebels and the Egg Forcers ends up going well for the Resistance. Sonic, on the other hand, is having a bit of trouble against Omega. Omega is a pretty tough bot, and the fights the two have been having routinely over the past few weeks have been pretty neck and neck, this one being one of them. With Rouge and the other rebels being too far away as Sonic and Omega's fight steered them farther away from the battle, nobody is able to lend Sonic a hand. The fight goes on for a bit, and it seems like Omega gets the upper hand. The Doctors take note of this and hop in their mech suits so they can try to kill Sonic themselves. They tell Omega to try and keep Sonic warm for them as they make their way across the city, and Omega at first obliges. A few seconds pass and he decides that he'll be more satisfied if he finishes off Sonic himself. Sonic chuckles slightly and makes a comment on Omega finally acting more like himself. Omega raises his arm cannon ready to blast away, and the Council in their mech suits are readily approaching, along with Rusty Rose. Just as Omega prepares to fire, a portal opens in the sky, and out comes none other than Nine in an airship. He shoots down and blasts Omega away, and turns to engage the Council. Sonic takes a few seconds to recuperate, and follows suit. Nine sends a few blasts the Doctor's way, sending them all out of the sky and falling down below. As they're falling, Sonic homing attacks his way through them and up to Nine. They both excitedly call out to one another, and Nine tells Sonic to hurry up and get inside. Sonic hops in thinking Nine's about to turn around and make his way back to the rebels, but Nine instead opens up a portal and flies on through. This is where they fly through, and Nine talks about the Shatter Spaces, as he proceeds to show Sonic the Grim. He spent the last few weeks here experimenting with the Prism Shard, and exploring this place as far as he could. As far as he can tell, it's a completely barren planet, nearly zero signs of life on the planet from what he's gathered so far. As he explains this, Sonic notices how excited he gets, kinda like how Tails would get excited whenever showing Sonic a new little gadget. He can't help but smile, as Nine explains further that this world is the perfect clean slate for the both of them. With the power of the shard, they can make more plant life to flourish, and the two of them can live there. Sonic, noticing his young friend's excitement, doesn't show immediate disagreement, but slight dismissiveness. He asks about New Yoke. It's his home. Wouldn't he want to at least help fight to get it back? Nine states how that place never gave him anything, so he feels no obligation to fight for it. Sonic then asks Nine if that's why he abandoned the rebels. Nine, like a kid who was caught doing something he wasn't supposed to, asks Sonic how he knew about that. Sonic tells him that it doesn't matter, and that leaving them behind wasn't cool. Nine is slightly sad in hearing Sonic's disappointment, but tells Sonic that by himself, with the rest of the Council present, there wouldn't be much he could do, which is partly truthful, but also partly excusatory. Sonic catches on to this, but doesn't want to push it any further. He tries to be understanding of all this and tries to encourage Nine further to help, but to no avail. Nine agrees to help Sonic get back to New Yoke, but doesn't want to fight, as he has more work to do in the Grim. The two then make it back to New Yoke. By the time they make it back, they see the Council has captured a few of the rebels, including Rouge. Sonic hops out of the ship and says a brief goodbye to Nine before diving down towards the Council. Really wish we could do this one together, bud. I'll see you around. Nine stays with a conflicting look on his face. We cut to Sonic diving as he spins into a homing attack and crashes into Eggman. He quickly rescues the rebels, and then another fight ensues with the Council, Rusty, and Omega, with Rouge sticking by Sonic. The fight goes on for a bit before Nine ultimately joins the fray, leading Doctors Eggman and Deep, as well as a few Egg Forces away to pursue him. And left behind, we have Dr. Deviled, Rusty, Omega, and a few other Egg Forcers. The separate fights go on, and eventually in the sky, Eggman launches the Yoke base and gets a hold of Nine in their tractor beam. Back on the ground, it's a neck-and-neck fight with Sonic, Deviled, Rusty, Omega, and Rouge. Eggman eventually calls for Deviled, Rusty, and Omega to make their way back to the base. Deviled and Rusty fly off, but Omega disobeys and tries to stay behind to finish off Sonic. And when Sonic turns and notices 9 captured, he hurries and tries to race after them, prompting Omega to give chase as well. As he's running, he's going faster and faster until a familiar glow begins to envelop him, with Omega fast behind him, blasting a barrage of lasers at him. Sonic picks up more and more speed, trying to reach 9. A voice once again calls out to him, telling him to keep going and to not stop, no matter what. Eventually, as Sonic's looking around to see where that voice is coming from, he nearly runs face first into a wall, before seemingly blipping out of existence. Omega, still flying at top speed, unintentionally crashes into the wall, seemingly decommissioning him for the time being. He flies out of a warp gate and is immediately stopped by a floating crystal, kicked into place by none other than Shadow the Hedgehog. Sonic pieces together that he's probably the one who he's been hearing all this time. He gets a little annoyed and tells Shadow if what he wants is a rematch, he'll have to play with him later. He just wants to help his friends and find his way back home. He turns around and floats away, attempting to leave Shadow to his own devices. And that's when we get the line,
Home? Home doesn't exist anymore because of you!
Before he shoots towards Sonic, and as he turns around, Sonic is met with a powerful punch from Shadow, ending this episode, Act 1, and this video.
Yeah, I very quickly realized that with everything I had in mind for this rewrite, it'd be a bit too much for just this one video. Yeah, sorry if this went on for a bit too long, but that does wrap up Act 1 of my Sonic Prime rewrite. The general order in which a lot of things happen in this show, I wanted to switch up just to make it feel a bit more interesting. Instead of hopping from New York to the boss cage, back to New York, to the no place, and then back to New York, I wanted to really just do one shatter space at a time before heading back to New York, as it just makes things flow more naturally in my opinion. I also removed the element that Sonic being in the boss cage meant that weeks had passed in New York City, as that's just an element of the story that never came back into play in any meaningful way, and I wanted to switch it out in favor of it having being a time skip of sorts. Having Sonic being in these shatter spaces for an extended period of time, not entirely knowing where his friends are or what really happened to them, or if he'll ever really see them again, just little stuff like that. Again, this video isn't me trying to claim to be a better writer than those who actually worked on the show, but more of just what I would have preferred it to be like. So, stay tuned on the channel for Act 2, which should be out eventually. So, with all that said, if you did or didn't enjoy this video, let me know right down there in the comments below. Also, be sure to like and subscribe. This has been Darion GB, and take care.